When he was in the days of his flesh, verse 7, that's when he was Jesus on the earth, he offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear. Though he was a son, watch this, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. He was without sin. He didn't mess up like us. So he gets to the end of it. How in the world is he going to understand us? And the way he understands us is he walks headfirst into suffering. And here's where I'm landing on that, in my opinion. We don't all have equal sins. I mean, you do one thing, I do another thing. I mean, we could sit up here all day and argue about who sinned the most, and that's just a stupid argument. Because much of it can be what happened in private, much of it can be what happened in public. We could tear off sins based on who it affected and who found out about it and whatever. Sin doesn't, we present sin in a theological sense in that it affects God the same way. We certainly know it doesn't affect us in the same way, depending on what sin it is that we commit. But here's the reality. We've all suffered. Now, we haven't all suffered the same, but we've all suffered. And here's the really tragic part about being human. If you haven't suffered in an area, you probably will. Okay? I'm not being negative. That's not anti-grace. This is just straight up reality. How many of you know it ain't easy being human? Yeah. That's why Jesus at the cross said, Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. It ain't easy being them. We all suffer. So look at this. When Jesus walks the earth, he doesn't sin. So how in the world? He doesn't need to offer up a sacrifice from sin. So how's he going to understand us? He suffers. Why? Because so do we. He's betrayed. He loses people he loves. He suffers at the hands of his enemies and his friends. He's an outcast. He's falsely accused. He's killed for the wrong reasons. He is constantly having to put off his own ideas and thoughts and desires for whatever is put in front of him, for the greater good of what is put in front of him. His suffering is not merely in one area, but in multiple areas. And then whatever is left, Isaiah 53 prophesied, would be put into his body when he went on the cross. Wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. So though Jesus never had to offer up a sacrifice for his own sin, he became the sacrifice at Calvary for all of our sins. And it wasn't just that he bore it, but that he experienced it at Calvary. Experienced what it felt like to fail the way I fail. Now, I forget this a lot of times because I think Jesus is at Calvary and he's got all my sins in him and he's carrying it boldly. What if he's not carrying it boldly? What if he's carrying it, but he feels the way you would feel if you had just done that? You say, done what? Any of it. Remember what we were talking about earlier, that we could go around the room and go, my sin's worse than your sin. Okay, take all of them and shove them into Jesus and who he is. And not just the sin, but the consciousness of having done that. And then he hangs on Calvary. Because it doesn't do any good for him to just hang there. He has to suffer here so that he can suffer here. Because it doesn't mean anything if our sacrifice doesn't understand us. This was the fault of the law. I sin, I bring a lamb. I know that that's not good enough. It's just a lamb. The lamb didn't do anything wrong. Hebrews realized this, and later in the book he says, here was the problem with the sacrificial system. It didn't take away our sin consciousness. We still felt bad. Why did we feel bad? We killed the lamb. We were supposed to kill the lamb. I shouldn't feel bad after I kill the lamb. The law says if you kill the lamb, you receive forgiveness of sins. But I still feel bad. Why do I feel bad? We go, because that's the condemnation of the devil. No, it's not the condemnation of the devil. It's the condemnation of knowing that a lamb's not as good as you, and it's not worth you. So you kill a lamb, but who cares? It's just a lamb. You got by with it. You did something wrong, and guess who paid the price? That thing. Oh, well, big deal. You go, yeah, but it cost you money. You had to pay for the lamb. You don't think people aren't willing to throw money at their sin now? People have always been willing to throw money at their sin. We're willing to throw money at our sin. Especially if it meant I could get over the guilt of it. How big's the check have to be? And so the law couldn't take care of that problem. You don't have to blame that on the devil. That's just because lambs aren't human. Right. It's why some cultures resorted to human sacrifice. Why? Because, well, at least my kid costs me something. I had to kill a piece of me to put my kid on the altar. You go, maybe you'll stop doing stupid things if it's going to cost a piece of yourself. And we think that might at least work because we got cultures that if you steal, what happens to your hand? Cut it off. The law tried that too, because maybe if you pluck people's eyeballs out and cut their hands off, they'd stop looking at what they're not supposed to and picking up what they're not supposed to. Why? Because it costs a lot more to lose your hand than to lose a goat. Okay? But God doesn't want human sacrifice for one simple reason. He loves people. I mean, I can give you 10 good theological reasons why it's not going to be effective. Namely, that none of them can actually take away your sin, even though they die on your behalf. But His love for people precludes any other possibility of human sacrifice on behalf of human sin. So Christ becomes the human sacrifice on behalf of sin. But that's not even good enough if He doesn't experience all that's wrong with me.